Hello, hello, and welcome to another session of Connecting the Dots, the interview series where we have thought leaders, innovators, and game changers of our industry share their tips, insights, and learnings. My name is Andy Waltenspiel, and I'm running a Munich-based consultancy where I'm advising and challenging thought leaders and innovators of our industry of telco and pay TV to connect the dots, to think beyond the obvious, and go the extra mile. That's exactly what we're going to do here today. Normally, my guests are from our industry of telco and pay TV, but today we will look beyond. We will enter the world of Formula One, the world of cutting-edge performing teams that understand each other blindly, the world of record-paced innovation, and an industry that has undergone tremendous transformation. So there should be quite a lot of learning from F1. My guest today has held leadership roles in Formula One motor racing for over 30 years. He was on the management boards of Red Bull Racing and others, and has worked directly with some of the sport's greatest world champions, including Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen. I'm super excited to welcome our fantastic guest today. Here is Mark Gallagher. Hi, Mark. Great to have you.
Hi, Andy. Really privileged to be able to join you today and contribute to your wonderful broadcast.
Great to have you. We had the pleasure to work in some events together, and I remember one where we asked at the end of 2 days, what did you like the most? And the F1 guy, that's you, was the big topic in that cloud. That was fantastic. So let's start with a few words about yourself and also your company. What are you doing now?
So essentially, I've worked in Formula One all my career. As you can see, I'm not a young guy anymore. So it's been a long time, a number of decades working in Formula One, straight from university. And essentially, as you said in your introduction, I've spent time in management in teams. And then when I finished my executive career in Formula One, I set up my own company, Performance Insights. And as the name suggests, we provide insights on the performance world of Formula One. I do a lot of public speaking. I've written a book, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yes.
And we basically represent over 20 very well-known people from Formula One who we bring into corporate events around the world, and they provide insights. I suppose in a nutshell, it's all around me using my experience through my company to provide insights and content around Formula One, particularly in the technology sector.
Fantastic. And that's exactly why I reached out and invited you to speak here. It's all about insights and learnings and what can technology companies learn from Formula One, which we'll talk about is maybe not a car company or car factory. In the end, there's a lot more. Formula One, I mean, we have a new world champion. Well, it's the old champion from last year. Right, yeah. But we have a new team that won the championship, and it's Red Bull. So we might think, okay, the world was in order when Mercedes-Benz and Ferrari were winning this. Now it's an energy drinks company winning car races.
Yeah.
How is this possible? What happened, and what do they differently in an industry that's not where they come from? How does that work? Give us some insight on that.
Well, I have to say, first of all, Andy, thank you for asking the question, especially at the time of recording. Very sadly, two days ago, Dietrich Mateschitz, who founded Red Bull, passed away. He died. He was 78 years old, so he had quite a long life, but an amazingly inspirational guy. And I worked with him, very privileged, worked with him only for a short time, but I worked with him personally and directly, which is always a privilege. And the reason why Red Bull are world champions is the culture of the business and the way in which their people then utilize technology to innovate and to create competitive advantage over the opposition. And as you say, one of the really interesting facets of it is the fact that Red Bull's core business is making an energy drink. And yet, when they bought a Formula One team, what they did was they, first of all, created a very clear vision. So let's be number one in the world. Secondly, let's employ the best people. So unquestionably, they have the most talented technical director in Formula One, Adrian Newey, very creative guy, a brilliant leader, and a guy who knows how to inspire a team of talented people. And then also to innovate in a way that challenges established ways of doing things. So not being afraid to take some risks in the sense of how do we upset the status quo. But Adrian Newey and the team at Red Bull, they really do develop a philosophy around their product and then really seek to optimize that and then to create a fantastic competitive advantage over a period of time. And it certainly works.
But yeah, the challenge people and last time you talked about it, I showed this book. It's Kill the Company, which is a fantastic exercise, which says, okay, what if I were my competition? What would I do to beat myself? And then, of course, think about it and play it on your actual competition. So this is happening regularly, you say.
That's brilliant, Andy, because one of the things which a team like Red Bull can do is to examine their weaknesses. So don't be arrogant about it, and
don't sugarcoat them.
Yeah, don't sugarcoat the message. And it's interesting to consider that Ferrari has now not won the World Championship for 15 years, which is a decade and a half. And so so when people ask me about that, I will say, well, one of the things to be successful in Formula One is you have to be brutally honest about where you're at as an organization, the things that you're good at, but also the things that you're quite frankly bad at. What are you not doing? Because that's the room for the improvement. And I think one of the commonalities between Red Bull and Mercedes-Benz, two very different companies. I mean, can you imagine Daimler-Benz compared to Red Bull? Incredibly different brands, incredibly different companies. But there's one commonality, and that is the way in which the teams of people work all in very much an entrepreneurial way to try and somehow capture that kind of startup mentality, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And to look at ways in which you can constantly move forward. And one of that ways is to constantly analyze your performance and be honest about that. And definitely, talking about, the book you just mentioned, it's kind of, if I was the opposition, what would I do to beat us? That's actually quite interesting, because if you know your business really well, you actually should know your weaknesses. What is the opportunity to beat yourself?
And you know all about all the dead bodies in the basement and the contracts that might not be that watertight. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things which in 2022 was a marked difference between Red Bull and Ferrari's performance in Formula One. Red Bull's decision making was crisper, more confident, their strategy decisions were very, very clear, very concise, and then the team acted quickly on the basis of those decisions. Whereas at Ferrari, there were a number of moments where they hesitated and they took a little bit of time to make a decision. And on a couple of occasions, in the middle of a Formula One race, they're actually having an internal debate about what we should do. Okay. And so when Max Verstappen gets an instruction, it's clear, concise. Yes, sometimes he doesn't agree with it, but actually one of the great things about a world champion like Max or Michael Schumacher or Ayrton Senna or Lewis Hamilton is that they actually do fundamentally realize that the team understands the bigger picture. So, if you want to have a discussion, we can do that after the race. Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got a race to win. Let's just deliver the strategy.
So that's during the race, right? And it's clear there you don't have time to debate. Now there is the time, there's after the race and before the next race. How does it work there? Do you really empower people to speak up? Is that part of the magic, why it works? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so again, so someone that I have a lot, well, not just me, but someone who across the industry is highly respected is Toto Wolff, Chief Executive of Mercedes-Benz Formula One. And Toto has built a really superior team, which has, until this year, dominated Formula One for eight consecutive years. And one of the things that's very clear is the degree to which they cascade responsibility through the organization. people are responsible for their area and their contribution, and they're allowed to take full responsibility for their area. So this is real I mean, it's empowerment with a capital E. You are given the opportunity to be responsible for your area. You're then expected to do what you say you're going to do, to step up. It's Toto talks about tough love. He says it's quite a tough environment. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you're not going to do it, please tell us as soon as possible, and we'll support you and provide a framework of support and coaching and mentoring and whatever. And so he really sees his job as a leader to create an incredibly empowered team of people who step up and lean into the task and really contribute to it. And part of that culture is psychological safety and being able to speak up and speak out, as you mentioned, Andy, and that's important because we can't afford to lose time. You have to really get on with speaking up and talking, even if you have to tell people things that they don't want to hear. Tell them, because it's much better to get it out there. The other side of that coin is the love part, which is we're going to tell you exactly what's happening, but actually, by the way, that's not because we're blaming you. That's because we're trying to help you, and we're trying to work together to problem solve. So this is a safe environment. It's a psychologically safe environment. We've employed you because you're valuable. We see that you have a huge potential to contribute. If something's going wrong, we need to know about it. We need to step up. We need to support you. Flip side of that approach, the alternative way, is where people don't talk, don't share, aren't open, disappear down into their silos.
And finger point and blame someone.
And then 100%. Actually, I will say this, that in my career in Formula One, tension between people within a team and blame culture and silo mentality, where people kind of disappear into their area of responsibility, there are the reasons why teams don't perform. They lose that teamwork, teamwork in its most critical sense. When you see that working, Andy, it's so powerful. But the other side is when you see that not working, when you see people blaming each other and all that kind of thing, you may as well put the car in reverse. You're going backwards. You're not making progress.
So you have the right team with the right culture. Often what we hear, but our agenda is so busy. We need to deliver this. We need to deliver that. And how do I even find time to think about innovation? So how do you do it in Formula One? Because you have super tight deadlines, 2 weeks, non-movable deadlines. How do you find time?
It's incredible. And all the deadlines are absolutely non-negotiable. So how do you innovate? Well, of course, the answer is you structure the organization in such a way that there are the people doing the day-to-day operational delivery for the business. And then there are people who are taking the short, medium and long-term view of where you need to get to. For example, Andy, at the moment, we have a very, very big rule change coming in 2026. So in 2026, Formula One teams stop using fossil fuel completely. And that's a massive technological change, regulatory change, whatever. So there are groups of people within Formula One teams who are today in 2022 really looking at the 26 program. So you're first of all saying we can't all be doing day-to-day operational delivery. We've got to create some resource and people and time who are looking at innovation. You create an innovation working group. They're drawn from across the business, so it's a cross-functional group. So this is literally a structure within the business. And then we're saying to people across the business, please feed your ideas into that innovation group. Obviously, if we find an innovation that makes the car 1 second a lap quicker, we're going to win the world championship. So
but sometimes you say, okay, normally you do innovation that costs $1 million, tens of millions. What if somebody comes with an idea like the push-pull wheel that costs only 500 euros? Is he even heard? And I think that was the example you brought back then. That It's how do I make sure everybody gets hurt, even if I don't know yet what will be the impact.
When I look at some of the big innovations in Formula One, they've actually been quite simple.
Mhm.
And sometimes when people come with simple innovations, there can be a response that that's not complicated enough, that somehow innovation has to be complicated.
Yeah.
Innovation doesn't have to be complicated. Innovation can be something simple. I mean, Mika Hakkinen, who you mentioned in the introduction,
Mhm.
he won the world championship twice. One of the years that he was winning, an engineer within the company came up with a modification which, this is a completely true story. The modification, the technology, the components that they bought cost €80,
Mhm.
and it
It-
improved the car's performance so much it gave them a clear advantage. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that it's not about the money, it's about the idea, it's about the preparedness of the organization to at least try it. And that particular innovation didn't get tried because everyone looked at it and said, well, it only costs €80, so therefore it couldn't possibly be that good, because surely innovation costs lots and lots and lots of money. That's part of the job of the innovation working group, is to say, well, what constitutes innovation? What does innovation look like, feel like? Are we only going to look at innovation if it costs $5 million? Because if we are, most of the innovations in Formula One of the last 50 years would never see the light of day.
yeah.
So actually, we need to start thinking quite differently about how we approach that.
If I remember correctly, you told me Max Verstappen, he started racing at the age of 17 without even having a driver's license
Yeah.
at this point in time. And he called himself a veteran back then because he were doing virtual racing since the age of 4. So how important is simulation? We mentioned, just had a different panel talking about digital twins of technology systems, but even of behavior of subscribers. So how important is simulation and stuff like digital twins for you?
In the old days, which is a terrible expression, in the old days. But in the old days, and by the old days I'm talking about during my career, we used to physically make, prototypes and test them, physically produce something and physically test it. And in fact, we used to have unlimited testing and development in Formula One. And here's the thing, Andy, that is now stopped. We don't do that. That doesn't happen anymore. So thanks to digital transformation, we can create a digital twin. Someone comes up with a bright idea. Why don't we design this or develop that component or improve this performance? We can actually simulate what that's going to do to the vehicle's performance. So we actually really don't want to manufacture anything unless we know it's going to work. It's a totally data-driven environment. If we stitch together the last couple of questions you've asked me, one of the really fascinating things is that, and stick with me on this, Andy. So on a Friday at a racetrack, let's say in Japan, Red Bull will drive the car. They will then share the data with the factory. The factory now has all the data from the car in Japan. And then overnight, while the team in Japan is sleeping in their hotel room, all of that data is then put into their driver in the loop simulator. So Red Bull have a third driver. So it's not Max Verstappen, it's not Sergio Perez. They have a third driver. And that driver is in the factory driving a simulator, and the simulator is utilizing all the data from Japan, and they can improve the performance of the car overnight,
Mhm.
so that on Saturday morning when the team wakes up in Japan, the factory has done a night of testing and development, and they will say, actually, we need to make this change, that change, you will improve performance. And it's really quite mind-bending when you think about it. But essentially what we're doing is we're taking the human, the driver, and we're putting the human into this simulation cycle,
Mhm.
where we're combining people and virtual environments to create optimized outcomes. And when people say to me, what would be your dream? So my dream would be to take some of the people that you work with, Andy, some of the people from technology sector, and get them to come and spend a weekend, not at the racetrack, but at the factory, seeing how we provide the support that drives the performance trackside. And that's the piece of Formula One that the sports media don't understand, that people never really get to see. It's the iceberg below the surface of Formula One. We get to see the little iceberg. in the race.
Yes.
Everything else is under the surface supporting it.
So, Mark, I might take you by the word, because we'll see. There will be a few people quite interested to take you by that and say, okay, how can we go there and have a discussion with these fantastic teams and learn from them? That's what it's all about. So let's talk about your book, The Business of Winning. A lot of pages. Yeah. It's more than 200.
It's actually a sore topic, Andy, because I actually wrote a lot more. My editor said 80,000 words maximum, and I think I wrote like 105,000 or something. Rather than just give some kind of overview of Formula One, I thought it would be interesting to create a book where people could dip in and dip out. So there's a chapter on leadership and leadership styles. There's a chapter on digital transformation. There's a chapter on risk management and safety. So I've essentially tackled the book by saying, here are some topics from the world of Formula One which have an application in the wider business world. I just had my third royalty payment, so it must be doing okay. So
Good. We could probably continue for another hour and talk about risk and transformation and all the challenges. But I know you have also non-negotiable deadlines. So thank you very, very much for being here with us. Great insights. And I'm sure we'll do more together, and maybe a visit to one of the factories. That would be super cool.
A great pleasure, Andy. Thank you very much. And great to talk to you.
Take care. See you soon, Mark. All the best. Thank you.